everybody. Welcome to InPsightRadio. I am your host, Danielle Egnew, and you are a fly on the wall to everywhere. How have you been hanging in there? I hope your summer has been awesome so far. We've been really busy on this end, doing all kinds of things. And I'm actually really, I don't know if excited is the word, yet I am compelled. How's that? I am feeling compelled. I am compelled to jump right into this podcast because we have a lot going on. And, you know, it's one in a series, and we've got quite a few things that are coming out right now in the United States and in the world that I think are really important to look at. And the obvious low-hanging fruit right now is the overturning of Roe versus Wade. And it was looking like, you know, that was going to probably happen, and things were kind of crispy and strange and weird there. And it's really important to understand the dynamics of what's going on with this Roe decision. And look, you know, I know there's a lot of you that tune into this podcast to listen to ghosts and to listen about UFOs. And we have those podcasts coming too. Yet my biggest job on this earth is to bring through information. And no, I am not an investigative journalist. No, I'm not a reporter. Yet when I am shown all kinds of things, I really like to bring those things across to you, because when what I'm being shown with the ethereal realm and through the angelic realm, if what I'm being shown there is cross-collateralizing with what's actually going on the earth, that's usually the cue that it's time to get out there and talk about it. And for years and years and years, if you followed my work clear back to when I started my blog in 2011 in thecalltolight.org, I was writing about the power of manifestation. I was writing about how when we place our mind on something, then that something is going to exponentially expand. You know, we kind of went from baby metaphysics to middle metaphysics to advanced metaphysics to, we're kind of in the PhD of metaphysics now. If you follow the podcast, if you follow the work that I've been putting out for years and years. And it's not saying that I'm all that and I'm fabulous and smart. I'm saying that there is an evolution to how we place forward our stacks of spiritual learning. And the place we're at right now is a really critical juncture. And I say that from a perspective of not only spirituality, yet an awareness that what we do in the spiritual world as applied to the physical world then creates our environment. And y'all have been listening to me for years talk about the fact that you can live up on your mountaintop and manifest away. Yet, to a certain point, life is going to come up and say, hey, smack you in the butt and say, get with it. You're in a body. You're in this third dimension. If all we are meant to do is sit on a mountaintop and never, ever interface with another human being, then we're kind of missing the point of being alive in a body. And really, the last year and a half, this message of us getting engaged in our communities, in our life, in ourself, in our world, in our purpose, this message has been so overwhelming that a lot of my work has been focused there. And it doesn't mean that I'm still not talking to angels, and it doesn't mean that I'm still not dealing with all of our extraterrestrials and the ethers and all the ghosts and all of that too. I'm still dealing there too. Yet we're in a pivotal time frame, not only in the United States, but on the earth. And the United States of America becomes sort of a manifestative template for other countries as they look at us and say, what the F are you guys doing over there with your court overturning Roe V Wade? Now, for a long time, you guys have been listening on this podcast and, again, reading blogs and following me on social media and whatnot, and listening to the information that I've been bringing through that talks all about the fact that where we're at right now with Roe versus Wade has been 60 years coming, okay? Actually, it's been since the Civil War, but it's been 60 years coming specifically in our recent history, all the way back to Republican Barry Goldwater talking about the biggest threat to the United States being the preachers in the Republican Party. And Barry Goldwater was a Republican back then, and he and many of his Republican colleagues were visited by they were basically religious extremists who were being groomed and then fed into the GOP with a very specific agenda. And I've talked about this on other podcasts, so the very quick bullet points are, there was this extreme religious group that has been grooming people to be policemen, to be judges, to be teachers, to be school board members, basically attorneys, lots of attorneys. And a lot of these religious extremists happen to be white supremacists. So that kind of went together. Now, there's a very large misconception in the United States. Well, there's tens of thousands of very large misconceptions in the United States right now. Fake news. Arr! And one of the biggies is that Antifa is a terrorist organization. Antifa means anti-fascist, someone who is anti-fascist. And in order to have a terrorist organization, you have to have someone giving out a plan, someone giving out directives, someone placing operatives in certain spaces in order to execute a plan. That's why the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys have been listed, both huge racist groups and white supremacist groups have been listed by the FBI as terrorist groups because they have official members. They make official attacks on or movements toward disturbing the peace. They recruit and they train. That is a terrorist organization. Antifa is an idea, okay? Anti-fascists. Once in a while, a few people dress up in black and run around and do a thing, but they're just kind of making up their own plan, and it's a form of protest, and nobody should be doing unlawful things like blowing up buildings and whatnot. That is not the answer, and we'll get to why here as we go along. However, Antifa is not a terrorist organization, but try telling that to some of the QAnoners who also believe that there are Jewish space lasers and there's a pizza parlor where Hillary Clinton eats children that she sacrificed to the devil. I mean, it is so insane and so stupid and so ridiculous that there's really no talking sense if someone is really down the rabbit hole of what the hell was that. However, with the knowledge that, say, the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys are actually listed as terrorist organizations in the United States. Let's go way back in time. I need, that cool 1960s sound effect. Do, 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 do. Let's go way back in time to Barry Goldwater in the 1960s. And let's take a look at the fact that he said the biggest threat to our country are the preachers that are being fed into the Republican Party. They are dangerous, and their agenda is anti-American, okay? And you can look this up. Look up Barry Goldwater. Look up preachers. Look up your own quotes. He talked about it numerous times. He doesn't just have one quote about this. So the fact is that this phenomenon that we're seeing now with Roe versus Wade being overturned has been in the works for a really long time. I have a very dear friend of mine who, her name is Penny Ronning. And by the way, if you want to back a great national congressional candidate, Penny's an amazing human being. Her dad's a Republican. Her mom is a Democrat. She's running in the Democratic Party here in Montana for U.S. Congress for the House of Representatives. And 5 years ago, Penny Ronning and I, 5 or 6 years ago now, God, time flies when the earth is caving in. I ran for mayor and Penny Ronning ran for city council here in Billings. And Penny and I got to know each other quite well. And I just love everything this lady is about. She's smart. She's awesome. She's a real human being. She doesn't believe in sticking people in political boxes. She believes in amazing people coming together and bringing their genius and making a better world out of it. All the things that I think are awesome. As a matter of fact, when I was running for mayor, I turned to her and said, Penny, why aren't you running for mayor? And she's so humble. She's like, oh, no, I'm happy to represent Ward 4. Well, now she's running for Congress, and she should, because she's that kind of person with a dear heart and a smart whip of a mind. And when we were running, Penny got invited. I did not get invited because I was the lesbian psychic running for mayor. So I did not get invited by the Republican Women's not convention, but organization of Billings to go to the luncheon. Penny was invited, and then all of the Democrats and Republicans were invited that were running to, although nobody was supposed to claim an affiliation. When you run for city council and you run for mayor in Billings, Montana, these are nonpartisan roles, and they should be, but people know where people tend to stand. So anyway, Penny was the only Democrat invited to this Republican women's luncheon 5-6 years ago in Billings, Montana. And it was then that they gave a very detailed presentation and said, in 5 years, we're going to overturn Roe versus Wade, and this is how. And they literally outlined every single thing that we saw happen to get here, from Trump to unlawfully shoving through Supreme Court justices. And that's what happened. You got to remember, especially with Amy Coney Barrett at the very end, the last 10 seconds Trump was president, he was trying to shove justices through because there was this big plan in place. And the justices he was trying to cram through, Amy Coney Barrett was supposed to be confirmed and really vetted by an entire group of Republicans and Democrats that would ask her questions. Well, it was such a farce, the way they were shoving this lady through to be a justice, that a good chunk of the Democratic senators that were there for this proceeding just didn't show up, because the rules of the proceeding stated that you needed a full group to vote, okay? Well, Mitch McConnell went ahead, even though the Democrats weren't there, voted. Of course, it was unanimous. They sent the vote to Trump. Trump signed it in, and went Amy Coney Barrett, even though there was not a full group to even go through the proceedings. And legally, you can't even actually do that. You can't vote without a full group. And they went ahead and voted with half a group. And these are big, broad brushstrokes. You can actually read about all the official terminology and whatnot for confirming a justice to the United States court. However, basically, they didn't have a full vote, but they voted, and Trump signed it, and here she is. And there was a lot of protest around Kavanaugh, too, but especially Amy Coney Barrett. She didn't even have the votes to get in, yet here she is lawfully sitting on the Supreme Court. So we've got a whole plan that 5 years ago, the Republican women of Billings, Montana, were explaining to Penny running, saying in 5 years, this is how we're going to overturn Roe v. Wade. So this is not something that just happened, okay? And so it's important to understand how this is happening and why this has been happening. And again, if you follow the work I've been putting out, you've been following along with the fact that we've had this religious extremist group that really has a war against secularism, wants to take everything that America is, do away with the secularism, but borrow its military and continue on in its holy mission. And that goes global. I mean, if you think that Hitler was going to stop at the borders of Germany, you are mistaken. Whenever you have a fanatic who believes that they are the only one with the right mission and they have the largest military, they keep going. So what we're experiencing here in the United States is something that Barry Goldwater years ago in the 60s said is a very, very dangerous thing to have happen, and we needed to keep an eye on it. Well, one of the things, I guess I got to say, I kind of have to give a little bit of credit here to the people who've been planning this takeover, and it is a takeover, for this long. And some of the credit that I give them is the patience that it takes to be this group of people. I mean, this is really, from the best way I can put it, this is a very well orchestrated interior attack that just hid very quietly and didn't make a bunch of noise and just kind of popped out all in the right places, and boom, all the pieces fell into place. So what we've got right now is a war within the United States that's not being fought with guns. It's not even being fought out in the open. And the people who are waging the war against the United States Constitution, the rule of law, what the USA is all about, and secularism, either are so smart or so cowardly, it's one or the other, to be wearing the suits of, the outfits of, the disguises of Republican senators, Republican governors of Republicans. And there are many in the Republican Party that are just allowing these extremists. And I'm going to use some war terminology just to make this very clear. I'm not trying to catastrophize, gang. Yet, honestly, I don't know how else to tell you this. But we're in the trenches at this point, gang, which is why I've been working so hard over the years to make sure that everybody understood the tenets of positive thinking, positive action, nonviolence, because it's really got us to the spot that we are right now, which is observing that the feminine time frame is here. The old masculine time frame, as we've talked about a lot, has died away. And we've been watching for years, starting with Trump, this last-ditch sort of carp on the dock flapping as it's losing its breath because it's a way of life that's dying. And is good going to work out in the end? Well, yes, it is. But gang, it's not going to work out if we don't apply ourselves. Now, thank God I've got timelines where a lot of great people apply themselves. Yet I also have timelines where a lot of great people are pushing themselves past their comfort zones to do things they normally wouldn't do. And no, that is not take up arms and create a militia. Listen here, folks. The same extremists that have now infiltrated the law in the United States, the same extremists which were going to rule and bring a ruling down that was so unpopular that for the first time in history, the Supreme Court placed an unscalable wall around it so people could not storm it, okay? For the first time, gang, our country has been taken over. Okay, now this doesn't, not by Republicans. For God's sakes, we've got to stop thinking like that. I have a ton of really amazing Republican friends and neighbors who are freaked the frick out by this Roe versus Wade ruling. Okay, they're not over here going, oh, yay. These are people going, oh my God, you mean I can't get an abortion in certain states? What the hell? I mean, not everybody who's a Republican, gang, is an insane anti-secular religious extremist. So let's not go be calling our Republican brothers and sisters a bunch of crazy names. Their party has been infiltrated. That has been the Trojan horse that has been used by this extremist group. And it is a pity that more Republicans are not pushing back on this. We do have a group of them. Kitzinger and God bless Liz Cheney. I never thought I would say that as a Montanan because the Cheneys are like, everybody just loves to hate the Cheneys, right? However, honest to God, I'm so grateful for Liz Cheney at this point. If I see her down in Sheridan, I am buying that woman a beer and giving her a hug. I am so grateful for what she's trying to do, which is to stand up for the rule of law and for the Constitution of the United States. Now, why does all of this come out of the mouth of a psychic? Why am I even talking about all this now? Because we as a nation have an incredible opportunity here to actually build on top of the bones of what the country was supposed to be. We have an incredible opportunity to really build that bright shining light on the hill. And I know I talk about that a lot, but we do. And the fact of the matter is this extremist religious group, this race, there's a lot of them are racist. A lot of this anti-women, anti-person of color, anti-anything but dominion of Caucasian male, but only the Caucasian males that bow in deference to their God. This is a spiritual issue. It's a heavily spiritual issue, which is why I'm talking about it. The God that these extremists have created, gang, has nothing to do with any Christian Bible. It's a whole separate God. And this God only loves white people, and it loves men most. And it only loves the men who love it. So other white men who don't bow down to this God are evil. And this God is the God of hypocrisy. This God is the God of money, and money buying off judges, money buying off all kinds of things. We're going to get behind some of that in just a minute too. This God is about manipulation. This God is about anything that doesn't have to really do with love or God. And by definition, if you were to break apart what this God is, If you are a Christian person, if you do have a Christian belief system, by definition, this describes the bright morning star, or Lucifer, actually, if you read the Bible, the great trickster, pretending to be God, demanding that people bow down to it. What we're talking about is a very dark energy that just exists in the third dimension. It has a right to be here. It doesn't mean we all have to participate with it. So this God, the God of this group, is ironically, according to the same Bible they claim they are referencing, describes Lucifer, describes what Satan would be. And so that's weird. But that appears to be the modality. They've wrapped this God up in a Jesus costume and off it goes, which again, if anyone happens to follow the Christian religion, if you read your Bible, it talks about a false god coming up that everybody bows down to. So there we go. So, this is such a big issue, which is why I'm always talking about seeing the hearts of our neighbors, seeing the hearts of people, because what just happened with Roe versus Wade is so massive. And I'll get into why. It's massive because it has started what these extremists are hoping for. And again, this is a takeover of our legal system. It's a takeover of our legal system. And I sincerely hope that people can accept this. I had a number of my metaphysical colleagues, the ones that are the peace, love, and harmony people, the folks who are like, well, I don't need to pay attention to this. It's low vibration. And hey, listen, this is not everybody's cup of tea. I get it. I completely get it. And it's really truthfully not everybody's calling to get down into these particular thick ethers or these trenches and explain it out so that people can understand what's happening. This is not everybody's calling. And I don't expect everybody to love what I'm talking about today. Yeah, it's my job, you guys. So I'm just trying to do my job. And one of the things that we need to be mindful of is not becoming violent, because the linchpin for this extremist group is martyrdom. Got to hear this one out, gang. So martyrdom, being the great martyr for your cause, for Jesus, being a martyr for Jesus, which isn't really Jesus, which is, gets creepy. But anyway, if level-headed people take up arms and start storming the Capitol and trying to blow it up and all these things, that's the linchpin that the extremists need to send their army in. And once their army is killed, then what you've got are martyrs. And then you have even a greater solidified holy war. And that's what we're seeing. And I said in the last podcast, this is a jihad, which is a focused effort, and usually for a holy reason. So the way to go about this is not the old world masculine, I pick up club, I beat you in head, I kill you, I take what you have. It's not the way to do it. And the only way that this extremist group knew that they could actually take over the United States of America was to do it quietly, to hide, to do it covertly, until they needed enough visibility with the president. And they picked, God bless Trump, one of the most broken bulbs on the tree that was exceptionally easy to manipulate through vanity and money, and had him execute the necessary functions to put the judges in. Now, it's very important to remember, too, that there were a bunch of judges, a couple of them that retired during the time frame that Trump was president. And I looked into that psychically, and there was a lot of pressure being put on those judges to retire. And I believe some of this pressure was 2 clicks off of threats to their family, to their livelihood, to retire. Also, people putting bugs in their ear. There is going to be such a giant cultural war coming. You're not going to want to be around for it. It's the conservative time, blah, blah. But I did psychically see a significant amount of not so good kind of mob style pressure put on the justices that retired out. because you'll kind of notice they just dropped like flies under Trump. Also, there was some concern from some of these justices that they were going to have to try Trump and be in a ruling position to impeach him or throw him out of the presidency or Article 42 him or whatever the hell it was even called back then. And so some of these guys just bailed because they understood that this extremist group that had been circling the wagons for quite some time was 2 clicks off of cranking down the noose. And that's exactly what happened. So here we are, and it's very important to note that the only way that we can push back in the real world, in the physical world, against what's going on is not through war, because that gives this modality exactly what it wants. And I know that's going to make a lot of you mad. I know a lot of you out there are mad. You're sick of it. You want to take your guns and go for it. Please don't do that. You will literally be handing these wackadoodles the country if you do that. And now I've got all timelines pointing in that direction. So please don't do that. What is better served is that they are trying to manipulate through the legal system. And the way that we usurp what they're trying to do is to bolster up in our local and state governments, in our local houses, our local senates, our local governorships, our local justices, to bolster those up with good law-abiding people that still believe in a free nation. Now, to some people, that's Democrats. However, I know a lot of really good Republicans that are not on board with this extremist agenda. So there are still really great Republicans out there that do not want the country falling into the hands of a bunch of wackadoodles, the John McCain Republicans. They're still out there, the Liz Cheneys. So I don't want to limit this just to Democrats, because I don't necessarily think that's true in a lot of cases. There are good libertarian candidates out there. They're just hard to get elected in a 2-party system. So looking for the people that right now tend to be predominantly Democrats, but not all of them are, who are interested in keeping our country out of the hands of religious wackadoodles, finding those candidates, whether they're Republican, Libertarian, Democratic, and voting them, or independent, and voting them into local governments. This is very important. Why is this important? Well, as you know, Roe versus Wade was overturned a bit ago, and in its overturning, it's important to note that the reason it was such a big deal, outside of the very, very, very obvious fact of women losing the right to say what happens with their own health care in their own body, which obviously is ludicrous. The biggest issue there is that Roe versus Wade was argued on the 14th Amendment, you guys. And the 14th Amendment, if you're not familiar, is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And, you know, Ginsburg, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, one of the big arguers and big proponents of Roe v. Wade, big proponents. The 14th Amendment, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, was a cornerstone for the Roe argument. Well, I'm not even going to call it a lawful court that we have. At least one of those justices was not actually put in through due process, and that was Amy Coney Barrett. So we've got this weird court that's pretending to speak for America, even though 87% of people polled, you guys, and that's an average, were for women having the right to make their own healthcare decisions. That's a majority of your country. So 6 people go in there and decide that they're going to pull this set of shenanigans. And they get, again, keep in mind that this has been a long-standing war. This has been a 60-year war that these extremists have been raging against cultural change. And why the 1960s? Why did this come about in the 60s? Well, come on. Peace, love, harmony, hippies, the 1960s, of course. Of course, there was a religious extremist pushback. And they realized that the pop culture was buying into peace, love, the love-ins, let's be harmony, man, cool. So they weren't stupid. And they hid their culture war. They hid it in legality. They hid it in due process. They hid their ideologies and just waiting to spring it in a unified plan over years and years. And really what pushed it to the surface was Martin Luther King. We had the Civil Rights Act was passed, gang. This whole thing we're seeing right now came from an insidious need to suppress people of color, to suppress women. This is a spiritual issue. The Reverend Martin Luther King, Dr. Martin Luther King, got out there and began speaking. He was a spiritual man who spoke for equality, which made him a political person. I am a spiritual person that is speaking for equality. So it's throwing me into the field of political commentary. I'm not equivocating myself to Dr. Martin Luther King. I'm just saying that's how people who start out in spiritual places end up speaking out in equality and end up getting thrown into political forays. And what I would tell you is that this has been a long-standing, very calculated war that started because the Civil Rights Act was passed. And remember, gang, it wasn't until the early 1970s that equal rights for women couldn't even get our own credit cards, gang. Remember that? In the early 70s, unless their husbands signed off on it or their bank accounts. This was very recent in our history that women gained equal rights. And a lot of that was Ruth Bader Ginsburg. So the reason that Amy Coney Barrett is sitting on a court right now is because Ruth Bader Ginsburg argued for her right to be there. Now, if that's not the biggest what the hell irony, I don't know what is. So there you go. So with this really incredible swing of, well, it's a war tactic. And it's really, really sad that I have to tell the truth and call it a war tactic. I wish I didn't, but I do. It's a sad thing that we're even here. If you're trying to bring down a country, you infiltrate the infrastructure and you affect the infrastructure so that the laws or lack of being able to reach for those laws is affected. It's what Nazi Germany did. It's what Stalin did. Name an authoritarian regime. It's what they do, okay? They go in there, they dismantle the laws. They get, the Nazis had the brown shirts. They get there, which is like the equivalent of the Proud Boys now. They get their extremists out there to start rounding people up. This is how it goes. Now, I know this sounds kind of grim. But gang, it's kind of grim. So now can we overcome it? Yes, we can. Yet we've got to be aware of how grim it is in order to keep our head, in order to be just as strategic and just as paced and just as methodical as the folks who took all the time to get us into this weird, crazy place to begin with. Are you following? Okay. So one of the things that really, really stands out in this time frame is the amount of terrorist activity, with school shootings and whatever, that really is not talked about as terrorist activity. I was looking into these young men, these 18-year-old young men that are going out and shooting everybody. And there is a type, there's a type, white, disenfranchised young men who play a lot of video games, spend a lot of time on YouTube, spend a lot of time online, and that's where they make their connection. And that's where they make their that's their only social outlet. And we have organizations that just this side of the law, just barely this side of freedom of speech, and really I think they're crossing the line at this point because they just don't care. There are organizations like the Proud Boys, like the Oath Keepers, that are recruiting young disenfranchised men. They're speaking their language. They're telling them that they're powerful if they would just XYZ. They are recruiting. That's why the FBI listed them as a terrorist organization. Now, we don't hear a lot out here in everyday land about what the FBI is doing. And neither should we, because they have a lot of active investigations going on. Yet in the next 18 months, we are going to have lots and lots of, I guess if you want to call it, stings on terrorist organizations that are like the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys, because these groups are assembling armies, gang. And this is why I'm telling you, if you're somebody that's just pissed off and you want to take your gun and get out there and go for it, please don't do that. You will hand it over to them. That is the key. They are hoping that some crazy hippie lefty goes insane and shoots something up, which isn't generally the way that people who believe in peace, love, and harmony roll. So they're really kind of frustrated at this point because we haven't done a lot more violent things on the left. In fact, if you look at a lot of the protests in Portland, those got way out of hand, and a lot of people were getting out of hand. Yet it was the extremists, the fascist groups, the right-wing groups, the racist groups that were coming in and shooting things up and starting all this disrest because the lefties just tend to stand around and yell and scream and wear a pussycat hat that's pink and do a drum circle and yell and say, why can't our earth be better, people? So we're not really reacting in the combative way that they understand to create the martyrdom, to create the recruitment that they're looking for. So please keep your head, okay? Firstly. Secondly, as we're moving through this, if you look at the art of war, the best way to take something over is to not let the thing know you took it over. And that's been happening for a long time in our country with our very wealthy running the country. We're a nation for the people, by the people, of the people. Yet our people have been checked out. And this is where I get a little gritty, everybody. So, there's a lot of America that's been checked out while this is happening. And I had a really amazing conversation with my Gen Z kid. And she's 17 and a half, and she and I were talking about what her generation, Gen Z, is doing about all this. And they're frustrated they're not old enough to vote. Yet many of them are going to be coming of age in the next couple of years. And they're going to vote. And they are not voting for a utilitarian, weird, they're not voting for this world that this authoritarian regime is trying to create in America. Which is why the Republican Party has been pushing, especially here in Montana, that a student ID to go vote is now no longer enough. You have to have 2 other pieces of identification, like a birth certificate and a driver's license. How many people in college do you think, did you bring your birth certificate with you to college? Because I know I didn't. I had my driver's license and I had my student ID. But now you need 2 other pieces of identifying information plus your student ID. So these extremists realize that young people aren't on board with this, and they're going to try to make sure that people can't get access to the polls. And that's also what the Nazi Party did. It's also what Stalin did. They made sure that they weren't much for voting anyway, but they made sure that people's voices could not be heard. Okay? So all of this is happening right now, gang. Okay? So back to the 14th Amendment and why this is such a big deal. So Roe versus Wade was overturned. The precedent for arguing Roe versus Wade was the 14th Amendment. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. With this kind of not exactly entirely legitimate Supreme Court we've got, some of them are very legitimate, some of them are not. And it's not because I don't like them. It's because they literally were not sworn in by an actual committee or signed off on or voted on by a committee, Amy Coney Barrett. So we've got this bizarre court that a portion of it shouldn't even be there, saying that the 14th Amendment is no longer strong enough to hold up a national law, and that law should be returned to the states, and the states can make the decision about it. Now, I have a lot of people going, well, that's the way it should be. I mean, we're the United States of America. Each state needs to be different. I will remind everybody, we are not a confederation of territories, okay? In 1776, we had a Continental Congress leading up to this. Everybody came together that were just state territories and decided that we were going to be one country. And it's called the United States. And yes, different states have differing laws. Yet we have federal laws for a reason. It's because our founding fathers decided to make a country, not a grouping of individualized states. Now, in the art of war, one of the best ways to conquer a nation is to get its own people to divide against one another and to get its regions to divide against one another. One of the big art of war tricks used to be to go into a country and take over the part of the country that grew the grain for everybody else and just starve out the rest of the country. So then the other provinces around would start fighting with each other over resources, and basically the people would do the work, decimating each other, and the invading forces wouldn't even have to lift a finger. Huge art of war trick, okay? So here we are. We've got this invading force, and they are an invading force, this from within. They're making a coup, an attempt to take over the country through the legal manipulation of our laws. So they take Roe versus Wade, that was argued on life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. They turn it back to state governments. Now, again, a lot of people don't see the big deal in that. Well, it's a huge deal, because what it means is any case that you argue where the 14th Amendment, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, or the interpretation of that amendment was the cornerstone for why it was put into place, well, that can just be returned to the states too, don't you know? And pretty soon we have a confederation of territories with weird little puppet governments that have been put in that are going to rubber stamp everything according to this new Godhead that is in the Jesus costume, but whose actual description really more fits Lucifer in the Bible. And it gets stamped out into these states. Not all states, but a lot of states. Problem with that, gang, is weakening the 14th Amendment. That puts same-sex marriage on the chopping block, which was also argued on the 14th Amendment. That puts women's rights entirely on the chopping block. That was argued on the 14th Amendment. That puts rights for people of color on the chopping block, which was argued on the 14th Amendment. So while we're all up in arms and mad and freaked out and pissed because of this ridiculous, it's so stupid, I can't even get my brain around it, ruling on women's health care rights. They were smart. This is a smart group of people, gang. They're not a stupid enemy. They are the Moriarty to the Sherlock Holmes. Okay, so can we just stop the narrative that these are religious extremists are these, the quote, and I don't even like this term, but it's a popular term. It's not for me. But the quote, Walmart people, that you see these poor folks who oftentimes are socioeconomically challenged, and somebody takes a rotten picture of some poor person with their pants down around their hips and their bum is hanging out and their tummy's hanging out, and it's just mean. And they spread it all over the place. And there's a lot of folks who fit that description at Trump rallies. And so we tend to have this narrative that, and I'll tell you what, these religious extremists want us to think that everybody's just a hillbilly and is not organized, and that is not true at all. There is such organization behind this. This is the Moriarty to the Sherlock Holmes, okay? And why am I spending all this time talking about it? Because in the same way that someone, again, I'm not comparing myself to Martin Luther King, yet in the same way like someone like Martin Luther King got up, he did something very dangerous and scary in his time. He got up and he told the truth about how all human beings were created equal and that there was a dedicated movement in the country to keep Black people suppressed. That was true. And I'm just bringing the truth to you here today that there is a dedicated religious extremist group that's very racist in this country that by rolling Roe versus Wade back took the power away from the 14th Amendment. And it makes it much easier to say, oh, well, we'll just let the states decide. We'll just let the states decide. We'll just let the states decide. Great, let the states decide. However, like a state like Montana, they go into states where people are asleep or a very trusting, kind, conservative community that's just there. They don't want to be overtaxed. They just want to go to church. They want to raise their kids. They just want to run their small business. They're good people, yet maybe they haven't left their state in 5 or 7 or 10 generations. And they always vote Republican. And these religious extremists like our wackadoodle governor, Gianforte, I'm done even trying to be kind about the guy. I mean, I would be kind to his face because my mama didn't raise a rude person. Yet this individual is bizarre. I mean, he's a bizarre person. And he's one of these, I would say, devotees of this God. It's not God, it's the new God, this God, this new God that they made. He thinks it's Jesus, though, which is very intriguing to me. Yet I can't not tell the truth about who people choose to be in the world anymore, gang, because it doesn't serve anything. And maybe Gianforte is the nicest man ever to his wife and his kids, and maybe his kids just love him to death, and I'm sure that's probably true. Yet as a governor, not so much, because he's rubber stamping this religious extremism. But that's what you do. In the art of war, if you're going to collapse a country, you place operatives in key areas, and then you blow the dog whistle, and you get the plan going. So with the Supreme Court returning rulings to the states, a lot of these states enacted illegal voting procedures, which is why the Republican Party or the GOP is screaming, voter fraud, voter fraud, voter fraud, Democrats, because watch these guys. They always accuse everybody else of the exact same thing they've done. And again, that too is an authoritarian tactic. Accuse others of that which you do and redirect people's gaze, okay? All of this is it's so obvious that I can't even believe I'm doing a podcast on it. Honestly, I can't even. Yet, this is where we're at in the world. So when you have people who have already been trying to restrict the voices of people of color in states like Georgia and Montana, where our extremist legislature, Montana's always been a purple state. We've always had like a Democratic governor and one Democratic senator and one Republican senator. It's always been split up somehow, or like we'd have a Republican House of Representatives and a Democratic Senate, or, there'd always be a mix here. Well, there were a bunch of new people who moved into Montana in 2020, fleeing more blue states. They didn't like the COVID restrictions, so our voter electorate was a bit tipped. And in the middle of that, this very extreme legislature that we have now, which is all red, which has never really even happened in Montana's history, gang. Okay, this is new. They're making it hard for Native Americans to vote because the reservations don't have the same gridded street systems and they don't have the same addresses, say, as a regular neighborhood. So our legislature in Montana is saying you cannot vote unless you have a street address. And you can't use a PO address. And that street address has to be on your driver's license. So basically they're taking out thousands upon thousands upon thousands of Native votes and just tanking them, which is actually ironic because a lot of Native voters tend to vote Republican. They tend to vote small government. They tend to vote conservative values. So weirdly, they're kind of shooting themselves in the foot there. However, their thought is, well, they're a person of color and everybody's Standing Rock and they're going to come out and, want to do away with the whiteys. And actually, that's hilarious because if they take 5 seconds to go talk to the folks on the reservations, again, a lot of them vote Republican. So we've had voter restriction going on because remember, this is a war plan. This is a war plan. This is a takeover plan. This isn't political strategy. This is a country takeover plan, okay? So first and foremost, you restrict the voting. Then you get the people in that you want. Then you have a government that's going to rubber stamp everything you do. Then you make sure that you shove through a president with the help of Russia and some wiggled news and some wiggled votes and some wiggled voting machines. Then you make sure that you shove through a bunch of Supreme Court justices to weight the court in one direction that's really ridiculous. And unless the Democrats are going to add 4 more justices, which I just can't see them doing, then, wow, here we are. Now you can return things to the states under the guise of honoring the Constitution. Except for the fact that we were supposed to actually have federal laws, okay? So this is why it's very important in our local communities that if you know good people who believe in rights for their wives and daughters, who believe in rights for people of color, who believe in rights for people who are gay, LGBTQI plus community, who believe in not having somebody tell them what kind of books they can read, who believe in life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, who believe in a true melting pot, which was indeed the bones and foundation of the Constitution. Granted, our country was formed on some rough, terrible stuff, on victimization, genocide, slavery, a whole country formed in the image of the old world, which was conquest and utter destruction. And that was the United States Western expansion and how we got here. And, you know, I saw a meme the other day that really, really summed it up. And it said, wow, the United States has been having a lot of problems lately and having a lot of troubles. You'd think that it was built on top of an old Indian burial ground. And it's so sickening and so ironic and so true, you know? And so we can't really go back into the hands of time and change how the country was founded, but we can certainly change how we build it forward. And our Constitution and our Bill of Rights gives us this incredible blank canvas, unless you have some authoritarian judges that are deciding, 6 of them for the rest of the country, what's going to happen. So this is where we come in, folks. You know, it's really, really important to understand why it's important to start waking up. And I don't mean woke. I mean, hey, snap out of your Kardashians program. I mean, making aware your friends and neighbors to the seriousness of this problem. And really taking a partisan tone is not the way to go. I'm not saying all Democrats are perfect. Heck, I mean, there's some great Democrats. There's some great Republicans. There are some crooked Democrats. There are some crooked Republicans, because people are people. Yet it's going to take getting everybody registered to vote, everybody who is willing to vote out extremism, okay? Who talk to your neighbors about why this is a big deal that this 14th Amendment got rolled back. Talk to your conservative neighbors and say, God, you guys, I have so much empathy for the fact that your party was infiltrated by this religious group that back in the 60s, Republican Barry Goldwater was warning the Republican Party about. I'm so sorry. Is there anything you can do to make sure to just not get those people voted in? Do you have any good, solid-headed Americans who just want to balance the budget in a reasonable way and let people live and let live? And because really the government, if you don't want a big government, people shouldn't be telling you who you can marry. That's a huge government. So, I mean, of a consenting adult, at least, of consenting age. So talk to everybody about how important it is that if we want to see the United States become what it potentially could be, and it hasn't yet. It's gotten kind of close, but it hasn't yet. It's going to take everybody to vote. And there was a big, big movement in the 80s, and I'm just furious about this. In the 80s and 90s, there was this big apathy movement of, apathy is the most horrific cancer in this country. This big apathy of, my vote doesn't count, nothing I do counts, it doesn't matter. Actually, it does matter. And while everybody was pouting about how their candidate wasn't perfect, while the left was throwing fits because somebody wasn't the second coming of Buddha and Jesus Christ who had a baby with, Mick Jagger to go be president, while the left was narcissistically imploding because a candidate was not exactly what my wants, the right was voting for the whole. So folks on the left, I understand that, there's not always going to be a candidate that you like. I get that. Yet we're not voting for the person. We're voting for an ideal here. We are voting in people who understand the rule of law and constitutionally protecting residents. So if you're still getting caught up on the left, if you're still getting caught up on, I'm a single issue voter and this candidate doesn't believe what I believe. May I ask you, at the risk of probably pissing everybody off here right now, to stop being for 5 seconds so self-minded. Yes, it is very important that your voice is heard as an American and you have that right and it's your rights and your rights. Those rights should be swapped out with the word stewardship. And a lot of the boomers that people love to go after, I'm Gen X, but a lot of the boomers that I hear younger generations go after, they just go after them. They're like, those boomers suck. Those boomers did this. Do you know a lot of those boomers went to jail? A lot of those boomers gave up great jobs because they were incarcerated, chaining themselves to fences so that women could have the right to actually get a bank account. A lot of those boomers that everybody likes to discredit and say are the big fat problem, a lot of those boomers are why Gen X, millennials, and Gen Z have had such a life that we didn't ever think Roe versus Wade would be overturned. Have had such a life that we wouldn't even take into consideration that interracial marriage would be weird. So can we just stop with the picking and the hating and the this is your fault and your problem and it's not mine and it's not my candidate? Can we please come together to just for once in our life, America, on the left, can we come together for a greater cause? And that cause is to hold a space to give what our democracy is a chance to truly grow so we can truly vote in the folks who truly do want to bring this country into a place where everybody is taken care of. Everybody who is a lawful citizen has rights. Can we just come together and not think so much about the self? Because I'll tell you what, that narcissistic stuff in this country is just rampant. And is Joe Biden my first pick for president? Heck no. Did I vote for Joe Biden? Heck yes, I did. Heck yes, I did. I'd vote for Joe Biden again. I would vote for anybody who's not going to come in here and turn us into this country that we've technically now become legally, where the 14th Amendment, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness no longer seems to be a federal cornerstone for arguing any rights. Okay, do you see why this is going to be a problem? Because it's all going to go back to the states whose voting has been blocked. And not all states, but a lot of states. So I know I'm sounding a little grumpy today, gang, and I'm not meaning to sound grumpy. I'm asking us all to be a little selfless here because we have a much bigger problem than a candidate we all love. That's like a really, really privileged viewpoint if you think about it. It's really kind of grotesquely privileged. Well, I'm just so happy in my life that my candidate needs to think of all my things. And if they don't, then I'm just not voting for them. Really? Well, great. And you guys, there's no such thing as a protest vote. And not voting hands stuff over to these extremists. And if you want to go ahead and say, well, it's my right not to vote, you are correct. But guess what? And this is the part you're probably not going to like. Oh, God, why do I get picked for this stuff? Why do I get picked to deliver this information? If you choose to, if you're not voting as a protest because your candidate just isn't fabulous enough for you, you are handing your rights away to a regime that doesn't want you to have any because you sure as hell don't believe in what they believe in. Are you hearing me? And if you want to laugh and be in denial and say, no, Danielle, that's not true. That's not true. You're catastrophizing. You're making a big deal. You know what? I'm going to quote my own tweet to all those people that said that I was a delusional wacko because I said that Russia helped Trump, which we're just about ready to hear with our little January 6th committee. We're just about ready to get to the linchpin on that one. To all the people that said I was a delusional wacko because I said that Putin helped Trump, because I said that capitals would be stormed and more capitals are going to get stormed. Just wait for it. Who said that I was nuts because there was this religious extremist group that had infiltrated our country and was planning on bringing through some authoritarian regime if we didn't do anything about it. To everybody that called me a delusional wacko, you can kiss my SCOTUS, okay? So if we all are aware of what's going on and we can actually think outside of our own narcissistic needs to have the perfect candidate, I mean, we got to get close, gang. But for right now, can we just not get somebody who's going to try to make this country into something it's not? And then we can nitpick, and then we can hold them accountable, And then we can get in deep with everything they do and write them letters and complain and do all the things we do as Americans. But this is going to take a grit and a sense of accountability that most Americans just aren't used to. And this is why since 2011, I have been talking about coming out of the woodwork with being able to have your voice, speak your truth, raise that vibration, manifest what you want in the world, work towards the manifestation. And this is working for manifestation. Voting is a form of physical manifestation. This is the country I wish we had. I'm not asking us to be like-minded. I am not asking us to enact in a way that a hive or a singular mind would enact. I am asking us to be like-hearted, and especially the privileged of us, the whiteys in this country, especially you white men, as far as the pecking order socially in the United States, you guys are the top of the food chain until we fix that. So especially white males who have the most power in this entire country. Can you just go out there and encourage some young men to use their voices and vote? Because here's what happens, gang, and here's a future cast. We get enough people voting against, not against Republicans, but against this religious extremism and this psychoses. There's going to be too many votes for them to gerrymander away and noodle and do all these other things. They're trying to push right now in the Supreme Court laws that they're putting Miranda laws back to states. They're putting, are you ready for this? They're pushing how electoral votes are counted back to states, which could mean that if a state legislature just decided that they didn't want the candidate who got the most votes, they didn't want to give that candidate who got the most votes in their state the electoral votes, that the legislatures in different states could just decide to give those votes to whomever. That's what's happening right now. And don't take my word for it. Go look up the Harvard Law Journal. Google all of this stuff. Do not take one human being's word for it. Look it up. It's all out there. And the saddest part, gang, the saddest part is that I'm sitting here watching all this coming for a couple of years and saying, gang, we are going to waylay it at the pass. We are going to be able to stave it off. We got to get involved. Make sure you bring yourself to your communities. Make sure you bring yourself, and I think a lot of us have been. Yet we really need to step it up. And is there hope? There's a ton of hope. And the universe has been trying to wake up the United States of America, one of the most prosperous countries on earth, for a long time. Okay? I mean, we got Trump. That should have woken everybody up. But a lot of people were mad, but then they just went back to their Nintendo. Then we had COVID, which killed millions of people in the United States. Did we all come together then for an overall good? Did we all go, oh my gosh, I should probably wear a mask so people next to me won't get sick? No, we did not. We divided into my rights, my rights. So we've had two huge lessons in coming together to tell the country that we don't want a certain message to be implied across the rest of the country, and we failed at both of them. Now, we did vote out Trump. But this whole time, we had our Capitol stormed because that poor delusional guy is still wandering and going around going, I won. And there's like 6 people who still believe him, but there's 6 people with a lot of weapons. So here we are. And we have incredible opportunities to sculpt this United States of America into a safe place for all people. And I do believe that is the definition of nirvana, okay? We've got the opportunity to do that. And please stop Republican hating. It's not the Republicans. There are weak Republicans that are falling in line behind these extremists. Yet that's not the issue. If we support the people who disagree with their own party, if we support them and say, yes, you don't have to be a Democrat, keep being a Republican, just please help with all of this. Vote for the people that will not take our rights away. I'll tell you something, lefties, and you're not going to like this either. I know this, I'm probably going to lose like 3,000 million subscribers off this, but the right will vote for a Democrat if the nation is in peril. A Democrat won't even vote for a Democrat when the nation was in peril. Bernie people wouldn't even vote for Hillary. Well, some did, but a lot of them wouldn't. A lot of people would not even vote for Hillary Clinton when the nation was in peril against Trump. When Trump ran against Biden, a lot of Republicans, lots of them, voted for a Democrat. Now, they didn't go there and they didn't say that they were going to change their affiliation. They're still Republicans, but they voted for the whole. Because for some reason on the right, they have a much better idea about community and stewardship. And somehow on the left, we have gotten so sucked into our own ideologies and our identities and our political ideologies and my voice and my thing. And please do not get my pronoun wrong. I mean, we've gotten so walled in because of our privilege afforded us by the boomers and by the people who came after them. So can we just kind of snap out of it, understand where we're at, understand that we've got a heck of a chance at turning this country around. Yet it's going to mean that we spiritually grow. And here's where the spiritual part of this comes in also. We have to grow past me, my. We have to grow up a little bit. And we've got to have our manifestative prowess or our vote cast in the direction that will be the safest for all people. Why is that important? Because, my privileged friends, not everybody can pick up and move to another country. And we have incredible, beautiful citizens of this country that are stuck here. That are stuck here with 3 jobs. They are stuck here in poverty. They're stuck here. And they can't just leave. That's privilege. That's financial privilege to just pick up and leave, to just liquidate and leave. How about we think about the people that can't just leave? And guess what, gang? A lot of those people are people of color. So to all my friends out there who are saying, that's it, I'm leaving, forget it. I mean, as long as you can still cast your vote, if you're living somewhere else, I guess. But can we please think about those who can't leave? Can we please think about what it's going to look like if we just sit back and hope somebody else handles this, and on the left just bellyache and moan because our person didn't get picked, so we're just not going to vote. Meh. And in the meantime, all of our people of color are stuck with a racist, supremacist white government that just starts deconstructing all the laws. I mean, I understand that sounds far-fetched, gang, yet it's not actually. And not all the justices on the Supreme Court, of course, are in bed with all of this. Yet, when I look down the alley of the future, we have a very specific choice to make right now. Do we get out there peacefully? Do we get out there and just say, nah, we're not getting involved in this. We're gonna get good people involved. We're gonna vote. We're gonna push this energy out. We're not gonna go to war with you. I know that's what you want. Nobody's shooting anybody. Is that what we're going to do? Or are we just going to pretend none of this is happening? Go back into our political ideologies, our identities, become our single issue voter people, sit this one out because who cares? It's all gone anyway. Boo-hoo us. Because if we do that, gang, we are handing this country over to something that we've never seen in this country ever. And that's what I was charged with telling everybody. And I was also charged with telling everybody that this isn't about the GOP. It's not about Republicans. It's about a mentality. So find the good people and let's get the good people together because this is a really big deal. You know, you always read about those pivotal times in history. You watch Selma and you think, man, if I would have been a person of color alive at the time of Martin Luther King, I totally would have marched over that bridge. Would you? Would you? Are you willing to vote for a candidate that's not perfect? Are you willing to vote for a candidate who maybe has this or that you can't stand about them? Just to make sure that for now we're not taken over by a crazy extremist wackadoodle land? Because that's kind of where we're at. And the one thing that these angels, and I'll leave you guys with this, the one thing that these angels have talked to me about is the fact that there are far, far, far more beautifully hearted people out there than people who aren't. there are far more people who just want a peaceful country. Okay, we may disagree on how to handle the money, for sure. Yet, I was speaking to my dear friend, Roy Pack, the other day. And Roy was in the Army. He was a military policeman in the Army. And in the 1980s and the 90s, they were issuing that the most dangerous terrorist group to the United States were the white supremacist groups. They were the most dangerous. And they're who we have heard the very least about. We hear about the Taliban and we hear about all these brown-skinned people. But the military is watching these groups and has been. So that kind of tells you the level of seriousness. This is not something recent. This has been building for a long time. And do we have a chance to turn it around? Heck yes. And you should see the United States of America that we are able to create through so much diversified representation, where we're not forcing everybody to be one thing or the other. People can just be lawful and be themselves, and everybody is taken care of. That is a huge opportunity. Yet we got to make it happen. And this is really where we got to have the firewall against this dark energy coming into our states. So I hope that this podcast was digestible enough. I did my best with some very difficult information here. I'm not afraid at all. I'm a little frustrated because I have a lot of colleagues out there in my metaphysical community who are just sitting around saying, you just need to pray. Okay, I pray too. But I'm also aware that we're in the third dimension and sitting around just praying. If we all did it, it might work, but it also needs to be accompanied with some compassionate action and lawful action. So let us just keep this in mind. And please continue your spiritual practices, raising those vibrations. This is not about lowering the vibration. Having a raised vibration is being able to look at a low vibration and not become the vibration of low. That's what having a raised vibration is. And that's another reason why I've been working since 2010 and 2011 on my calltolight.org blog to teach people how to raise those vibrations so we can be in the midst of a lower vibration and not become the low vibration. Because we can't live in a bubble, gang. It's not life. Nor would you want to. This is an incredible place to be, the earth. And I encourage everybody to go out, share this information with whoever you can, because it's time that we band together in the United States of America, not in a war, yet in an impervious firewall for the rights of all people. A lawful, nonviolent firewall for the rights of all people. Figure out who's running in your local races that are good folks. I don't care what party they are. Good folks. And back them up. Help them out. This democracy only works because we work. All right, gang. I'll let your brain rest. Thanks so much. And I will see you next podcast.